Did you know that we're more than just a podcast? We actually have a LinkedIn group. We have a YouTube channel with a bunch of YouTube shorts. We're also on TikTok. I think Jocelyn requested that. And then for some reason, Wendy wants us on MySpace, but I don't know if we're there yet. However, check us out on those other channels. And if you're wondering why we haven't covered a particular topic yet, well, ask us. Go to aka.ms/low code topic request. That's one word, aka.ms/low code topic request. Thanks, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a senior product marketing manager on the Power Platform team, and I'm joined by...
It is I, senior child and senior product manager of Power Platform Security and Purview Integrations, Jocelyn Michelle, and as always, we have Brother Ken.
Hello, yes, and I am Ken Aguilar, the baritone voice of the podcast here. I would like for you all to imagine a world where we live in ever-changing times because of AI. But what if I told you that our next guest thinks that bacon is way more important than AI? This person, who was just a lovely part of this podcast, decided to go on a bacon adventure for several months. But now she's back. Hello, Wendy. How are you?
You couldn't let the bacon thing go.
Hi, Ken. I'm back. I'm so back. And unfortunately, baconless. So our poor audience is sitting here going, what's with the bacon? I feel like we've got to explain this story.
Yeah.
Do you know the story, Jocelyn?
Not even like maple specific bacon? No bacon? Zero bacon?
No. So we record this podcast stupidly early on Friday mornings. And my poor husband, for a period of time, was getting up and he kept trying to make these big breakfasts. And we would always burn the bacon. And so during the podcast, the fire alarm would be going off because it was a bacon emergency. And he was very sweet. He was getting all the kids wrangled and everything else. But there we go. So that's with all the bacon. And anyone joining the podcast is like, this is weird. Why are we talking about bacon on the low code approach?
It was almost like clockwork. We would probably be about 25 minutes into the podcast where a smoke alarm would go off and we'd have to... It was great. It was absolutely fantastic. But for real though, Wendy, where were you? We kept on saying you were doing these bacon adventures. You were doing soapbox posturing, the land of never. You found out turkey bacon was a thing around Thanksgiving. That's huge. But really though, where were you?
I feel like I was listening to a slow roast. As I announced on LinkedIn, I was building my fourth Copilot. Or my fourth agent, I should say, actually now. So I had my fourth baby last year. And so I have been on a mission now to use AI to simplify my life because it got infinitely more chaotic. So I have been having a wonderful time being mom and also playing with cool tech on the personal fronts. And it's been great.
Nice. Well, welcome back and congratulations. And we love having you back.
And a huge shout out to Jocelyn for covering for me and stepping in. So thank you, Jocelyn.
It was such a privilege. And I'm so happy to have an episode with all four of us.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Only with all four of us in the same room at one time now.
Never gonna happen. But so one thing I do want to talk about though is you're back, and in that time that you were gone, oh boy, were there advancements in technology, right? And so you may have come back to a totally new landscape for how we deal with Copilot, generative AI agents, just how you implement that into your day-to-day business processes. And so we wanted to get advice from you and recommendations on how do you acclimate to a changing business world, just like you did coming back to Microsoft. Because we use Copilot and we use agents all the time here. What helped you succeed?
It's actually really interesting because I have found that every maternity leave, I've actually been able to spring forward a little bit on my career. And part of it is, I think, getting away from the grind of all the notifications and announcements and backing up to the big picture. So while I wasn't plugged into Microsoft, every product announcement, I was looking at what's the trend, right? And so coming back, I already knew agents is a thing. Every company is jumping on the agent bandwagon. I knew that there was debate and lack of clarity in the industry about what is an agent, what does it mean. I also knew that there was a shift with models and competitive landscape internationally where people were looking and companies were looking at, well, if there is an AI ceiling in LLMs, right? There is no law, we've hit some barrier, we can still do more with what we have. And we haven't even explored that fully. And so I started developing these big buckets of what's going on in the world. And it actually helped me coming back into the 8,000 whatever emails from Microsoft when I came back to my inbox and the different product announcements, because it actually gave me a framework to categorize. Oh, this product update fits in this bucket, right? This is the part of the agent strategy. Oh, I know that there's been an increase in cyber attacks. Okay, this bucket on governance, or this update fits in the governance and security bucket. And having that framework was really helpful. The other thing that I did, I'm not going to lie, you can't replace getting hands on with the tool. So I built an agent already to help me get up to speed. And I built one for the podcast because I tried really hard to stay up to speed and listen to you guys, but I haven't hit every single episode. So part of what I did is like have an agent grounded in our show notes and our transcripts. And so go, okay, if I don't want to repeat a question that was asked previously or information. So how do I get up to speed? Not just on the tech, but on what's going on with my company. Let me build it, get experience with it, and then actually ground it in some of that data. So then Copilot, asking tons of Copilot questions, pulling up a product article and querying that to make sure I really understand it has been helpful too.
So, Wendy, as you got ramped back up on all of this and Copilot was able to help you catch up to speed, was there an update or an announcement that surprised you most?
That's a great question. I don't know if that's anything necessarily surprised me. Like all of the updates made sense. What really surprised me, I think, was the UI change, the amount of UI shift. So, like, there's this trendy, Copilot's the UI for AI, right? But a lot of it's been me listening to things or reading an update, but not really being in the tool. And so coming back and seeing how much, I built a form yesterday for a customer training that we're doing. It took me 2 minutes. I just typed. I just entered a box, actually I didn't even type. I dictated. I used the like window H thing and just talk because I like talking to Copilot instead. Built the form and I was done. And I think even though I knew it was happening, that the shock of the shift of we're going into more of a voice or text-based control for everything, I think it's amazing because it's unleashing creativity. You're no longer having to hunt and peck for tools. You can just think about what you need and giving it feedback. Kind of like that vibe coding thing, Sean, we were talking about before. I had to slip that into the podcast.
There's marketing buzzwords that we have to hit with every episode. So thank you, Wendy.
When you're CEO of Vibe Codes, it's cool.
Oh, no, agreed. But like you did not miss a step. And thank you for doing
No.
that. I really appreciate that.
You're
Ken,
welcome.
what do you got?
I got nothing. No, I'm just kidding. Wendy, so essentially what you did was you became a customer, it sounds like.
I missed you, Ken.
So from a customer aspect, how difficult do you feel that it was for you to become acclimated to the latest updates and everything? I know it might seem like a little bit of a rhetorical question, but just imagine yourself right now as not being a Microsoft employee. How did you find the experience?
So I subscribe to Copilot as a consumer. I went on this mission that I need to make sure this works for me personally if I'm going to be an evangelist of it for work. And so I will confess that I was a little bit in the know just because I've been playing with the tech personally. But one thing I would say is definitely triaging the importance of an update, the relevance to you. I think I was a previous podcast. I think it was The Guy in a Cube, one where they talked about, you don't need to know everything. So figure out the few things that you do need to know and care about, filter through that lens, and as things bubble up. So if I'm focused on Copilot and AI, I will know about security and governance through that. But I don't necessarily need to go all the way into Sentinel or to Purview. Sorry, Jocelyn. But, I know that's your world, but you look at the world of how it touches the world that you're in, right? You don't have to know every single product update and feature. And so again, having those buckets of what do I care about? How do I classify that? Has been helpful. And I would also say is carving out specific time. One of the things I did is I actually created a rule in my inbox to gather product updates into a folder versus having it throughout. And I actually set aside time every day to go through the updates in batch versus try to piece it together as you work. Because I think that as you're piecing it together and interrupted, you don't see the trend. But when you can go through, for 30 minutes or whatever, read that, you start seeing the trend line again of how it all connects. I find that I'm having to go back through things less often or repeat it because it's been helpful to understand that big picture and how it's all connected.
So you're back in your time off, you're studying up, you've thought of use cases, which I think is a huge component to agent adoption, is understanding what's possible and like how does this actually apply to my day to day, and I can and kind of build some success behind them. But now that you're back and you're speaking with your peers in where you work, in the teams that you work with predominantly, what's the feedback that you're hearing on gaps? Where do we need to help and get more content out to maybe drop the confusion that you're seeing there, across your team and maybe even with customers and emails that you're responding to? And
I mean, can I ask for a product update? But I think there's 2 points of confusion or feedback. I think obviously, and this is across the industry, it's not just Microsoft, is that there's still a lot of confusion of what is an agent. I think we talked about like knowledge agents versus execution agents. People don't think of knowledge agents as agents, even though that's absolutely what they're doing. And so I feel like we need to get better at clarifying what an agent is. I think the which agent when story needs to get better. Of, do you go to a SharePoint agent, an agent through Agent Builder, an agent in Copilot Studio? Do I use the Graph API or a Teams? We have so many different places and the tools are all right. But that which tool when guide is a point where I hear a frustration. By the way, huge shout out, guys, to what you did in the admin center for PPAC, where you have more proactive recommendations or a single pane where even if the setting isn't in PPAC, Power Platform Admin Center, you're linking to the right place. We're starting to do that now on Copilot and agents. And I think that needs to continue as a feature request to grow, of just giving us that single pane of glass to govern the agent and know what's there and give proactive recommendations around agents. And so continuing the trend that you're doing there as well.
it's really interesting that you bring that up because you kind of went through two different audience experience or UX
Yeah.
experience for the audiences, right? Like one for the maker or the agent creator that's building out agents. And then the second one is the admin. And I think this is where I want to turn the mic over to Jocelyn to say like, hey, coming back for the admin experience, because there's multiple ways to administer agents, right? There's in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, there's way to admin agents there. And then there's ways to do that in Power Platform Admin Center. And we're trying to make this more intuitive for an experience. But then there's also the security and data protection aspect of that, right? And gaining visibility into that. And so I think this is where I want to pass the mic to Jocelyn to say like, hey, what's your experiences there? And Jocelyn, is there anything that you can make us aware of that's on the roadmap, or not, maybe not on the roadmap, but on the train for any protections coming there?
Yeah. So I want to first touch on what Wendy said about Purview, which was, I was laughing in the back of my head too, because
Ken's making bacon?
Oh man, we're 15 minutes in. This is perfect.
That's not me. It was not me.
So I was thinking about what you said about having Purview be elsewhere and Sentinel be elsewhere versus Power Platform Admin Center having a single pane of glass type view. And I definitely think something that we, Jocelyn, in like FY, whatever the next one is, 26, we'll be thinking about is how can we be able to bring that visibility that the tenant admin has to a Power Admin specific scope with the richness of Purview, but it's not just going to be like the entire organization's information. It's going to be the information the Power Platform admin cares about. So +1 there. Then more so to Sean's question of like, what is coming? What's on a train, right, Jocelyn? I think we've made great strides when it comes to the proactive and reactive combination of administration approaches in Power Platform Admin Center, where you have the recommendations and you have advisor and you have the SafeO-meter or the security score, but we're going to go even further by making it customizable, right? I really think that having a security score is such a fantastic, tangible way for you to know how good you are doing, right? But at the same time, I've said this before, this is me, my inner sales child spiel, right? I don't think that every single customer will ever be 100% Microsoft, right? It doesn't have to be for Microsoft to win. That's okay. I still strongly believe that we are the best software provider in the world, and we don't need to win across the entire suite of capabilities for us to continue to provide you offerings. So that being said, if you choose to have some other offering that you're leveraging for some portion of your administrative needs, perhaps that should not impact your security score. Perhaps you should still be able to have a good security score knowing that you took the measures you needed elsewhere. That's my teaser for Build.
And I don't think that's an inner sales thing. I think that's boots on the ground reality. One of the things I will say is that coming from a company, and I mean, Ken and I were both in this similar role where we did administration and product and service management, but we had every different company and tool under the sun
Yeah,
to a more cohesive infrastructure. There's something to be said for the ecosystem of
absolutely.
Microsoft, right? But there are places where companies do like to differentiate. And I think that being able to have a view of what is my landscape that is personalized really would resonate with companies there. So I'm excited for your announcement. I want to turn a question back to you guys because this is a conversation that I have been tracking in the industry even before I came back. And it's something that I would say I've noticed you guys building more into the product. So, do you think that prompt engineering is or is not an essential skill for people to learn? And when I say you bring building more in the product, I'm seeing that there's autocomplete of prompts or suggestions or refine my prompts. And so, do you think that the system can just figure it out, or do you think people need to actually invest time in that?
I'll go first. I think that prompt engineering as a skill, I think it's going to be foundational in getting better results with the agents that you're working on. But in time, just like any other skill, the more you practice, the better you'll become at that. And I think it'll just fall back onto the same practices that we had to go through when, and this is really going to date me, but like when search engines were introduced on the internet and you had to understand, like, if I'm going to make a query, how do I actually have to structure that query to get the results that I want? And I think the same thing applies. But like in time now, it's so intuitive, it's so easy. You just ask what you want and you get it. And I think the same thing is going to apply with agents. Systems will be smart enough to build the agent that you want. And yes, there's always going to be further refinements, but for the most part, it's going to get it right up at first. And I think that's where we're going to see. So in time, things will get better with prompt engineering. But I think right now, it's a skill that we should all get better at and then take those learnings into improving the experience as we move further. Ken, what are your thoughts on it?
Wait, I'm interrupting, Kat. I went to a bunch of MVP Summit sessions where I had to be helping and hosting and running around, but I also went to one session where I just got to attend and I found it so enlightening. It was with Sean Watson and Jason Huang from Julie Cosvarno's team, who we will have on the podcast in a couple of weeks here. And these folks are responsible for like querying Dataverse proper in like a bunch of various AI driven scenarios. And I learned something really interesting about how the success rates of prompts vary depending on like the quantity of words that
Yeah.
you actually input into your question, right? So I thought it was really related, Sean, to what you were saying about how we had to figure out how to use search engines at first, right? Do I just like put a word in there and see what comes up versus do I ask it a full question? And they were giving these really awesome examples where it was like trees question mark versus what are trees in my area or like trees near me and the various success rate of these different types of prompts. And I just think when they really lifted the veil or the curtains of this insight, it was really awesome to think about how we can figure out how to better interact with these agents. Okay, back to Ken.
Thank you, Jocelyn, for that wonderful commentary right there. Sean, I'm going to answer Wendy's questions by saying this. In the past, when we first started getting into Oracle, SAP, SQL, and so on, what was one really essential individual that we needed within the enterprise?
DBA?
Bingo.
Yep.
You are correct. Database administrators. Those folks were the, I guess, know it alls, the source of the
Yeah.
truth, the kings of writing the queries to get what the business needed out of data, right? Including master data within the enterprise. And Wendy, it's funny that you asked this question, but because I was actually thinking about that, and I think what we're going to have, I don't know what the acronym would be, but imagine enterprise prompt engineers. I think that's one of the next roles that's going to play, a pivotal part of this evolving landscape that we have. We're going to need someone who needs to understand how to get the most out of AI and these connections and so on that we build. We talk about connecting things into our data, but it's only as good as the query that you can write, as well as, of course, the data that's inside of there. So back to Jocelyn's point, if I'm connected to master data, maybe my HR database, and I say, give me Sean's name, well, here inside of Microsoft,
There's a lot of
how many Sean's is it going to give me? But if I ask it for, hey, give me Sean's name, that loves wine, that's in marketing, that likes to wear headphones, has XYZ characteristics, then it's going to
Touch.
give me very, very specific data.
Is that a thing?
And it's the same way with AI. So, in these prompts, that's my thoughts.
You bring up a good point, right? And I think this goes into democratizing that kind of work where way back in the day, if I needed to go and get some specific data, you reach out to your DBA, you say, hey, write me a
Mhm.
script, give me the query to get this report. Everybody remembers Crystal reports, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, probably not Jocelyn, you weren't
Yeah.
alive. That was a lot of work, right? And you had to bring barbecue or cookies to your DBA to get these types
Yeah.
of
And there's the
results.
backlog. There's a
There was
backlog of
definitely a backlog. Yes.
things that they had to work through.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. But Ken, you're saying like, hey, you need people that can write these prompts to go and or queries and prompts to get this data back for you. And that's where agents come in because I'm now creating a templatized version of the prompts that I want. And I would then make that agent available and publish that agent to my organization so everyone, I can democratize this, everyone can go in there. Well, whoever you share it with, right? Obviously, there's permissions around all this and our role-based access control, but like you can go and get the data that you need and make sure that not everybody's knocking on the desk or the door or pinging you on Teams to get that data for you. And I think that's the beauty of what agents can do, right? They can really speed up business efficiency in just your day-to-day work.
It's kind of like whenever we had our folks on there some time back. Wendy, I think you introduced us to them. They had Prompt Buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did it. So this is what I'm seeing on the field and in the industry, right? The thought leaders are having conversations like Ethan Mollick. Is it about prompting or is it about use cases? Gartner actually said that the ability to generate use cases, right? Ideate on use cases and find that is an essential AI skill for the future. But what I'm finding is I'm having less conversations coming back. They're still there, but around, just how does AI work or what is the infrastructure, how to configure it. And so much more of my time is spent on someone saying, oh, I bought Copilot, I'm using Power Platform or whatever it is. I can't get out of it what I want. There's a product problem. And then being able to come in and go, oh, well, you asked for, let's keep with our Sean example. You asked for a Sean, not a Sean, in marketing who is on the podcast and, more specific details. And I think that this a thought of if everyone can learn this skill, not necessarily that you all have to be the equivalent of a database administrator, but the idea of you're looking at the world differently. You're learning how to take time and slow down and think about all the things that you need at once is really, really key. And it's kind of a shift. I'll end with this, the think deeper or deep reasoning models, right? That's all the trend right now. Many of us were starting in our prompts to say, take your time, do another check, go slow, please review this a second time, whatever the little hacks that we would do. And a lot of that came out of realizing, we got better results when we added those things in. And so we haven't really finished exploring everything to do with our models. And so much of that is in control of companies today, just by being more strategic with their prompt engineering, with the technology that they already have. Even if you stopped innovating right now, which I know you guys aren't going to do, there's so much more that company value that companies can get from this as we're even building these intuitive prompts inside the product to help guide them to think this way within the product as well. And so I don't think it's dead, but I definitely think being that use case generator and seeing opportunities for automation is really going to be key moving in the future. And that's been a big shift coming back.
Wendy, you said something, and I'm going to double down on what I said earlier about those new prompt engineers being extremely important to the future. You mentioned the models, and the models keep changing and evolving. Well, just like SQL 9, 10, and so on, we keep adding new functionality and what have you to these models. I think that in the future, as these models progress, it's going to become, how should I word this? You're going to need someone that's extremely creative to come up with these prompts, not just someone who's very, very technical. I feel that this is going to open up another avenue for people to become technical professionals just because they're able to write these extremely well thought out prompts. Imagine just sitting there and telling the story to it or what have you.
I'd even add, it's funny, I actually think on the Power Platform side, we've run ahead of a lot of this
Yeah.
because we've lived the whole fusion of citizen developers and, subject matter experts before. And prompts are a version of that, right? Someone who knows some of those tips of if you put something at the end, it's more heavily weighted in the prompt than at the beginning, for example. All those things about prompt engineering, but you have the business expert being able to inject that feedback of what they're looking for and more specific. I think our centers of excellence, our governance, our communities that we built in the Power Platform is actually something we are already starting to draw from on Copilot and to bring that over in all of its different permutations. So companies that have watched this Power Platform actually have some of that muscle in there already to implement this into their companies. So it'll be interesting to see what roles are created or how careers change in the future.
Wendy, those were great closing words, and I kind of just want to end on it at that point because that's fantastic. Guess what, everybody? Wendy's not just a guest; she's back as a host. So we're excited to have her back on all the episodes going forward, and Jocelyn too. We'll be having a whole, rotating series of hosts for this. I'm super excited because we get to increase our views and opinions on things with our guests. So this is going to be great. Thanks everybody for joining us. Wendy, welcome back.
Awesome. It's good to be back, guys. I missed you.